Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to At World's Edge, the Fantasy Lore podcast. I wanted to go ahead and do two today because they're relatively short, and because in honor of the Total War Warhammer 3 upcoming DLC, Thrones of Decay, I thought it was important to give a little bit of background lore information, a primer really, for those of you just joining the Warhammer franchise and maybe weren't playing 15 years ago when the franchise was when Thrones of Decay was actually on the tabletop and being released as a book. So we've already talked about Tamurkhan, the Maggot Lord, and I wanted to touch base on Elspeth von Draken. This is the primary defender of Nuln, which is the final part of the campaign that Tamurkhan embarked on. His goal, much like Archaon's a decade later, was to obtain dominance over chaos. In his case, he was looking to obtain the throne of chaos or ascend the throne of chaos, which would lead to his apotheosis and become a demon prince, as opposed to Archaon, whose goal was to destroy the world, which he, of course, eventually did and is recounted in the end times. But speaking of Tamarkan and the period we're talking about, we're going to find ourselves in Nuln in the latter part of the 2400s and early part of the 2500s imperial calendar. Elspeth von Draken is the Magisterix of the Amethest Order. For those of you not aware of how the magic orders are designed in the Empire, they follow the eight winds of magic. Currently, the head of the magical orders is Belthazar Gelt of the Gold Order. However, before him was Thyrsus Gorman of the Red Order, and of course we have Elspeth von Draken, who, while she never headed the orders of magic in the Empire, mostly because she was uninterested in doing so, she is the most powerful practitioner of the Amethest or Purple Order, which is death magic in the game. For those of you who play Age of Sigmar, that would be the Wind of Shayesh. Elspeth von Draken has a little bit of a sinister reputation, largely because of her association with amethyst magic, but also because she stands mostly aloof from the rest of the Empire. There's some questioning about her general existence as a rule, because she is extremely youthful, despite having served in her capacity for more than three generations, putting her easily in her 70s or 80s, and that's if she if she's been in the same position for as long as she's been, an adult. Um, but she actually is not a vampire or a demon. She comes from a long line of amethyst wielding, magically powerful sorceresses. From her name, von Draken, we can assume that she came from Drakenhof, which is the capital of Sylvania and most famous for its vampire count associations. This is a valid theory not only because of the name and how names work, but also because of her association with amethyst magic, which is especially powerful in Sylvania, which we find later on in the lore as well during the end times and also throughout the vampire count's history. So if we assume that, then we can also take away that she was from a noble family originating in Sylvania that at some point migrated out, since Sylvania is no longer friendly to living things, and she became associated with the city of Nuln. She takes up residence in the Abbey of the Lilies in a wizard's tower outside of the city, and also has another tower in the Grey Mountains. We don't know exactly which tower is hers. We can go ahead and accept. We know of two that are in the area: Hellspire, which was a former vampire keep, and Drakenfels, which was home to the Nameless, it was home to Count Drakenfels, who by the time of the end times was known as the Nameless. In both cases, the castles have been cleared of malign influence, and yet rumors persist of strange lights in the night, spells, and folks disappearing when they approach. My my theory is probably that it's Castle Drakenfels, largely because there's been no negative associations with what's going on there, mostly just that local folk are anxious about it and see weird things, which would make sense for a reclusive sorceress who's practicing and experimenting. But it doesn't have any of the negative and sinister associations that the Hellspire does, where folks disappear and are presumably killed by vampires and liches. But that's all conjecture, and if you'd like to imagine that she's at Castle Drakenfels, or maybe that she has her own tower and the Grey Mountains are just rotten with wizard towers, that's perfectly fine as well. As it stands, though, we run into her in the city of Nuln, where she was both the protector and the advisor to Countess Emmanuel, who was the Elector Countess of Nuln at the time of Tamurkhan. And when Elspeth von Draken appears, it tends to be a portent of something important happening, in this case, the invasion of Tamurkhan, the Maggot Lord. And Elspeth von Draken's assistance in this matter was absolutely essential. Her mastery of the Amethest College and the magic thereof was able to successfully counter the chaos magic that was brought both by Tamarkan and by Sale the Faithless. Without her magical defense, quite frankly, the city would not have succeeded. On a more practical, martial sense, she rode a carmine dragon into battle, which is among the most powerful types of dragons, both magically and physically. And she was able to reap a pretty bloody toll on the chaos forces assailing the fortress. And indeed, in the end, she was also the one responsible for Tamarkan's destruction. Although Theodore Bruckner was the one involved in actually striking the 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 Maggot Lord in physical combat, he came to battle bearing a magical amulet that the Magistrix had given him. And when what this did was that it caused a fiery explosion that killed Tamarkan right as he was approaching apotheosis. Furthermore, as he had gathered more and more magic onto the field, creating a storm of magic, which is something we can talk about in another video, um, the 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 death of the wizard caused the storm of magic to fold back in on itself and absolutely decimate that area of the battlefield, destroying the center of the Chaos Army and forcing it back, as well as denying Tamarkan his apotheosis to the ranks of the demons. The expenditure of energy literally took Elspeth von Draken out of the equation as she faded from sight. Her carmine dragon fell from the sky dead, and it was assumed in general that she had given the last full measure of devotion for the city of Nuln. And indeed, she did not appear to take place in the events of the end times. So, while there were reports of her walking the world again and appearing just as youthful and just as pallid and otherworldly as she had before, the fact remains that she did not show up when the Empire needed her most, which doesn't quite seem like what she would be about. Though at the same time, I have a different theory for that as well. Even had she survived, had she fully regenerated, the fact remains that in the end times, Nagash drained all of the amethyst magic out of the world and drew it um, into Sylvania, into his basically magical lightning rod in the ground there. We see images of the Amethyst College quite literally fading into nothing, and it's the wizards who practice it also fading into nothing. I think, unfortunately, it is most likely that Elspeth von Draken, especially as suffused as she was with amethyst magic, was likely killed during the end times when Nagash absorbed amethyst magic into himself. But what are your thoughts on the matter? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's going to be some more literature that comes out. While we likely won't see Elspeth von Draken in the old world, just because there's no evidence that she was alive at this particular time period, it's certainly possible that we could see someone of her previous generations, maybe someone serving in Nuln still or in another capacity. In any case, thank you for tuning in today. It's been great, and I will hopefully be putting out a Malachi Malakson uh, Warhammer lore focus in the next couple of days, if not tomorrow. Thanks, and you have a great day.